Hi everyone, Paul B here with the 10% proof of malignant Meannesota narcissism. Last night I was at Petco because since I've been homeless I find myself visiting pet stores once in a while just to spend some time with the animals because the animals are very friendly and affectionate, and frankly they're more humane than Minnesotans are. I like spending time with them. So last night I was at this Petco where there was a very special cat up for adoption. I've seen this cat several times. The setup for their cages, there's 3 cages stacked on top of each other, and this cat was in the middle one, and the front of the cage is just glass. So I was kneeling on the floor. I had my knees on the floor with my hand on the glass so I could scratch the glass and get the cat's attention. And this Minnesota mother with 3 small children come over and they just barge their way right in between me and the glass. And again, I was on my knees on the floor about 6 inches away from the glass with my hand on the glass, and yet somehow they just barged their way in. Basically pushed me out of the way. They did everything but just with 2 hands push me over onto the floor. And on my website, Meannesota.com, I talk about the fact that Minnesotans are the worst parents I have seen anywhere in my travels. And I can say this with authority because what I witness with these people is uniform. It's the same error that they make with their children uniformly. There's not diversity. It's not like one of them does it wrong this way, the other does it wrong that way. They all raise their kids exactly the same way. And the way they do it is this. They do not teach their kids how to be good citizens or how to be decent human beings. They don't even make up for the horrible school system here and teach them the true scientific method or history or the value of knowing history and not repeating history. What they do teach them is just one thing overall. They might teach them how to fix a snowmobile engine or something, but what they teach them in terms of their character is just one thing. My child, you are the center of the universe. Everything revolves around you. It's all about you. And if you see all these creatures running to and fro that look kind of like you and kind of like me, they are irrelevant. The only reason they exist is to serve you. And if you don't need their service at any given moment in time, you can just shove them out of the way. And if they persist in being in your presence when you don't want them around, you can just exterminate them. And then you can go to bed and sleep like a baby without any conscience or remorse, because they're irrelevant. That is how Minnesotans raise their children, and that's why a generation of human monsters keeps raising yet another generation of human monsters, which I call Minnesota. Would you like another example of bad parenting in Minnesota? How about, let's see, there was the time when, here we go. How about 5 minutes later, when this Minnesota mother with the $300 haircut and the pretentious attitude and the handful of high-speed digital electronic handheld mobile devices came back with her brood of DNA pets and did it again. Once again, while I was on my knees trying to get that cat's attention, they just shoved their way in between me and that cat. Twice. If you really think about what that Minnesota family did and the fact that that's how they raise their children by example, that tells you an awful lot about Minnesota and why it is as bad as it is. Now keep that in mind as I give you the 10% proof of malignant Meannesota narcissism. 10% of 30,000 is 3,000. 10% of 3,000 is 300. 10% of 300 is 30. Keep that range visually in mind. 30, 300, 3,000, 30,000. Now, my former Minnesota employer, every single year, the 600 people who worked there would gather up at least $30,000 in what they called charitable donations. This money went to a billion-dollar nonprofit organization which is pretty famous for its malfeasance, for its mismanagement of funds, for putting money in its own pockets at the expense of the people it was supposed to help, and for generally poor stewardship. The $30,000 or more that my former Minnesota employer gathered for this billion-dollar nonprofit organization each and every year went toward paying approximately 1/20th of the head of that nonprofit organization's annual salary. Now, it's hard to get exact numbers because for some reason, they tend to hide how much they actually take home. But according to the most reliable sources I can find, the CEO of this nonprofit organization takes home a salary of between $500,000 and $600,000 a year. That's just the salary, though. If you include perks, there's really no limit to how high that could go. But even if you put it at $600,000 a year, that means that my former employer, it would take 20 of companies the size of mine with comparable donations just to pay the CEO of that nonprofit organization's salary for 1 year. That's it. Long, long, long before they would ever even start to have money to actually use for their charter to help people, which they rarely actually did unless they were on television. Now, the thing is, the president of the company I worked for was on the board of directors of this billion-dollar nonprofit organization. So when his underlings raised that much money every year to help make this millionaire richer, it made him look good. So it benefited him personally and professionally. It also benefited his underlings, the rank-and-file co-workers where I worked, because it made their supervisors happy, because that made the president happy, and because since this billion-dollar nonprofit was 501c3, they could write it off on their taxes. And again, through all of this, nobody actually got helped. Certainly, no lives were saved. All it did was go to make a millionaire richer, to benefit personal and professional lives, and to get tax write-offs. And they call that charitable contribution in the state of Minnesota, particularly in Meannesota. That's $30,000. 1/10 of that is $3,000. $3,000 is what I am asking for to save my life. It is the bare minimum amount that I need to get out of Minnesota, get an apartment, get a job while paying my bills with enough padding to cover at least minor emergencies. And I'm more than happy to pay that money back. So I'm not even asking for a gift. I just need the money somehow. It's the only way I'm going to survive sleeping in a car in a Minnesota winter with no money, no resources, no income. That's 1/10 of what my company, my former employer, gathered every single year to give to a millionaire. And yet, that company did not mobilize and pass around the hat and give me anything. These are people I worked with for 7 years. I counted them as my friends, and frankly, I counted them as my family. I watched their kids grow 7 years. I worked alongside them. A lot of them, I did their jobs for them, while getting paid less than I should have gotten paid just for doing my own job. And yet they couldn't pass the hat around and gather anything to save my life, while they're more than happy to gather $30,000 to make a rich person richer. That's $3,000. 1/10 of $3,000 is $300. $300 is the amount it would take for someone to adopt that cat at Petco. And it's a really sweet cat. You know what? Somebody is going to adopt it. So some individual or family is going to spend $300 to save the life of a cat. That's what one individual or a family is going to do. $300 to save a cat. Yet, I cannot get 600 of my former coworkers or 5 million people in the state of Minnesota to come up with $3,000, which I'm happy to pay back in order to save the life of a human being. That's $300 to save a cat. 10% of $300 is $30, which is all that I have to my name right now. Because thanks to Meannesota apathy, negligence, incompetence, and corruption, I lost everything I worked my entire life for. 48 years. It is gone forever and ever and ever. It is gone for eternity. It is gone for as long as Satan will be in hell. And yet, out of 5 million Minnesotans, they can't scrounge up $3,000 to save my life, even if I'm willing to pay it back. Now, Minnesota portrays itself through the myth of Meannesota Nice as the most friendly, kind, compassionate, neighborly, generous, and charitable people in the United States of America, to such a degree that they look down their noses at everyone else in every other state. They think they're better than everyone else in those regards. Or at least that's what they publicly portray. You tell me if that's consistent with that scale I just described, from 30 to 300 to 3,000 to 30,000. Because in that range, everyone comes out smelling like a rose except me, the human being who needs help to survive. The president of that nonprofit organization, who's already a millionaire, gets more money, comes out smelling like a rose. The president of the company I worked for gets professional and personal benefits by having that much money raised for an organization he's on the board of. Comes out smelling like a rose. The employees who raised all that money come out smelling like a rose. They please their supervisors by doing it, and they get a tax write-off for their so-called charity. The individual or family who will adopt that cat will come out smelling like a rose, because that is one sweet cat. The cat comes out smelling like a rose. And frankly, even now, in all these pet stores, there are cats and hamsters and snakes that all have a warm bed to sleep in tonight, food, water, toys, bedding, and they have people come and play with them and give them some affection and some love once in a while. I have none of that. I'm sleeping in a car in a Minnesota winter. Now, if you think carefully about what I just said, those 10% orders of magnitude tell you everything you need to know about the reality of Minnesota. It is one vicious, mean-spirited cult. Other people do not matter. The only thing that matters is them. They do not care whether other people live or die. And the last way I'm going to make that point in this particular video is I'm going to point out that yesterday, for reasons unknown, the rear windshield on my car / home that I live in an Arctic Minnesota winter just suddenly shattered and collapsed into the car. And yet, I'm going to play the weather report for the next few days for you. And as you listen to that report, I want you to remember that even though I have contacted, directly or indirectly, by my estimation, roughly 11,000 Minnesotans, or the representatives of 11,000 Minnesotans, I've gotten no help. They haven't saved my life. Now listen to the weather report that they are going to experience as well, knowing that I'm sleeping in this car. And then you just decide for yourself whether these are truly the most kind, compassionate, generous, charitable, neighborly, friendly people in the United States of America.
Now here is the hazardous weather outlook for portions of central and southern Minnesota and west central Wisconsin. For today and tonight, morning freezing drizzle mixed with light snow will end by noon in far eastern Minnesota and western Wisconsin. Dangerously cold wind chills are expected later tonight, with readings as low as 35 degrees below zero. And now the extended outlook for the period Saturday through Thursday. Dangerously cold wind chills of 25 to 45 degrees below zero are expected Saturday night through Monday morning. Dangerously cold wind chills of 25 to 45 degrees below zero. 45 degrees below zero. To 45 degrees below zero.